Places across the state of Oregon, when a fire breaks out, it's a volunteer firefighter that shows up to put it out. In fact, 94% of all fire departments in the state are either all volunteer or a combination of paid and volunteer firefighters. But there's a problem with that model that could put more people at risk in the future. And that's our big story. The problem is relatively simple. The number of people willing to answer the call to be a volunteer firefighter is dwindling. It's becoming harder and harder to both recruit and keep volunteers to fight fires. And that's concerning for communities across the state. And that feeling of fire vulnerability is only expected to get worse. Investigative reporter Kyle Abogi has the story.
Someone grab a fire extinguisher. If we don't, we should have one on this rig. This rig is kind of stripped, so if we don't, we will take it off at engine 87. Once we have that all in place, I'm going to go ahead and start.
It's training day at Nestucca Fire. And volunteers from all walks of life are suited up. They train for fires, water rescue, crashes, whatever may come their way. Like most fire departments throughout Oregon, Nestucca relies on volunteers to save millions in taxpayer money. Roughly 2/3 of the staff at Nestucca Rural Fire Protection District are volunteers.
Probably 95% of our calls we couldn't do without our volunteers.
But Chief James Ader admits finding people to answer the call is becoming more difficult. The number of volunteers has dropped statewide. 73% of Oregon's fire departments reported a moderate or significant decrease in the number of volunteer firefighters over the past 5 years.
Do you worry about the future at all, as far as getting enough people to answer the call?
Yes, all the time. My biggest concern is that there's going to be some day that I have to make that decision that we got to let that call go. And that worries me.
Recruitment has become more difficult because many people just don't have the time. They've got work and family to deal with, longer commutes, plus the time and training needed to become a firefighter have also increased.
Just to become a firefighter, it's 120 hours of training before you can get checked off and finish getting certified as a firefighter.
And that's for volunteers.
That's for anybody.
These volunteers must be ready to dash off for an emergency, day or night.
So yeah, the cows also eat over in that barn over there and then up through here.
Bill Slavens and his wife Ginger run a commercial dairy farm with 250 cows. They also volunteer as firefighters. When a call comes in, they drop everything.
If it's a big motor vehicle accident with extrication and stuff, we're all going to try to get there. If it's a structure fire, everybody needs to be, it's all hands on deck.
For the Slavens, there is the social aspect. The fire department is a community. It's also exciting. Volunteering is a way to contribute to the community.
I think it's just the self-satisfaction of trying to take care of people in their sometimes worst times, and that's a good feeling. It is. It's a good feeling.
Bill is 64 and a captain with Nestucca Fire, where he's been volunteering since 1985. Many of the active volunteers are getting older and close to stepping away. In Oregon, the largest portion of volunteer firefighters, 23%, are 60 and over.
In this world today, people think they need to be compensated for everything, and we don't have that. We don't feel that way. We just like to go out and do stuff for our neighbors and try to keep everybody intact and healthy.
Firefighting duties have also shifted. Volunteers are asked to do more. The Nestucca Rural Fire Protection District covers miles and miles of farmland, along with rugged forests and coastline, not to mention busy Highway 101 in South Tillamook County. Emergency call volume for Nestucca Fire has more than doubled over the past decade. This year is on pace to set a record, 1,200 calls for service, up from roughly 450 in 2009.
We pretty much cover just about anything there is emergency-wise. We have water rescue, we have car wrecks, wildland fires, structure fires, hazardous material calls.
Fire districts like Nestucca work together and provide mutual aid more than ever, even for small incidents. Everyone is stretched thin, struggling to recruit and retain volunteers. Across the country, state and local governments are trying new tactics to entice new recruits, like offering stipends for training. income tax credits and putting money in retirement accounts.
Oregon doesn't provide anything for the volunteer.
For 16-year-old Megan Mason, who's training to become a volunteer, it just came down to awareness. Firefighters are desperately needed.
And I think maybe it should be advertised more as something fun and something available, because I had no idea this was an option that I could go do.
Volunteer firefighting has long been a part of American life. When a fire breaks out, friends and neighbors show up to help put it out. But in this community, like so many others, there are fewer people willing and able to respond as volunteer firefighters. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.
Thanks, Kyle. And we'd love to hear your thoughts about the volunteer firefighter shortage. Would you consider doing it? Why or why not? Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.